So welcome everybody, this is Shirley Thompson again. This is our third webinar in a series of 10, and William trusts me to introduce myself today, like last week. So he likes to say I'm Dr. Thompson. I'm very proud to be a doctor, but I very rarely use that in my communications, but we will refer to my thesis. I just like to say these days I'm a professional coach, very proud of that also. And have a background in software development and also in project management. So I've been a tester, I've been a project manager, and I like both those roles very much. So very happy to be speaking to you today. And today's webinar is on effective communication, which I think is one of the crucial skills in coaching. And it'd be really nice to know from you all today whether you think you're an effective communicator already. So I probably would give myself a 6 out of 10 for my communication. So nowhere perfect and lots of room for development. So perhaps you'd like to put something in the chat about where you think you are as an effective communicator. And then we'll also see who's joining in. It'd be really nice to have a collaborative space today as usual. Right, here's the agenda. So a little bit of a welcome. Then really I'm going to get into what I think effective communication means, and then invite you to have some discussion on what you think it means. And then I'm going to put my challenge, which is kind of the model I've been using for the last 3 sessions, to give you some information, get some discussion, and then challenge the view. I'll give you my challenge, which says that all stakeholders take responsibility for judging effectiveness. So there's a certain inevitability about that, but also I've deliberately chosen the word responsibility because I think we all need to consider that effectiveness is being considered by everyone all the time, which means we need to think about it at the outset. So start with the end in mind is what's, is it Simon Sinek says that? Or Mr. Covey, Stephen Covey says that also. So we'll see at the end whether you accept the challenge or not. So, right, let's move to the welcome then. So the whole series, the idea is to challenge coaching culture. And I feel that everybody who's involved in Agile has a responsibility to build the culture. It's going to emerge whether we put effort into it or not. So whatever culture we it turns out emerges because of a set of people working together. That's the culture. So I'd like us to influence it. So I'm here to challenge. So, and the green wrapper here is definitely challenge, and for us all to become wiser through that challenge. So in the middle, yeah, I'm going to be prompting thinking. I'm going to try and be encouraging more awareness, inspire you to try things out, experiment, and therefore support your learning through practice. But all that has to happen, you know, not only in this call, but afterwards as well. So just linking back to the first 2 sessions, the first one was about conversations, and the point we made was that conversations need relationship. And then last week we talked about relationship, talking about it as an object, an entity, that needs 2-way commitment. So we're in the interpersonal space here, humans talking to one another, and they've all got a relationship between each other. And here we are today talking about communication, and clearly communication relies on both conversation and relationship. So session 3, who measures effectiveness and what is the value of effectiveness? That's what we're considering, and we're going to try to get to my challenge, which is that all stakeholders have a view. So my question to start off with, get us going, is what learning would be useful to you today? What have you come to find out? So make sure that I'm on track. So is there anyone that would like to volunteer something, or maybe you'd like to just, if you unmute yourself and say something, or write in the chat, that's absolutely fine. William, you're a very busy person and you're on the call today, so.
So
What would you like to find out?
why is effective communication needed in coaching? Because I know the coach is a listener, and part of effective communication will be being able to listen.
Yeah.
So wouldn't it be a one-way um, discussion where, as a coach, I'm asking a question and I'm expected to be listening to the other person. So it shouldn't be a two-way affair. So that's one of the key things I've been pondering about.
Okay.
Mm.
Well, I agree with you that listening is really, really important. But communication includes those questions that you're asking as well. So the effectiveness of the questioning or the effectiveness of the observation, the feedback that you give to people to help them think might be interesting. So we'll try and think about that, this kind of two-way thing. So I'm really trying to focus on this idea that there's two things going on. So both in conversation or communication, there's two people are listening and two people are saying things. So they're exchanging. So we'll get to that. I can't see the chat box because it never comes up for me. Is there any? Oh, here we go. So chat. So what's up? Okay, so expressing thoughts with clarity. Okay, yes, that's good. I agree. So adding to William's question there, communication does really need to be clear. So when you ask questions, it does need to be very simple so the other person understands. Oh, it moved on. Okay, so I'm bringing my soft skills model today as a number one thing because effective communication is right in the center of this layer. So this is the soft skills model I came up with, and my position is that this model represents any soft skill that you want to think about. So you could challenge me on a soft skill and I explain where it would sit. And most of soft skills that people write in huge long lists are out in relation to intentions for relationships. So if you're trying to manage or to coach someone or lead someone, that's an intention for the relationship that you're wanting to have. So they all sit on the outside, but to make that intention happen, we all need to have effective communication. And yes, there's something about ourselves as well. But today we're right in this middle layer where our focus is on the other person. And we're trying to be effective with our communication. So I've put a little bit of a context around this as well, because every time that communication happens, there is a context. So my skill model, it kind of assumes a context, but today we really probably need to think about the context of something happening. So here's the definition I found online that I really liked for communication. It's about exchanging information, which I think that's really important, and also understanding the emotion and intentions behind the information. So I thought it was quite nice to think about social media for a picture that goes with communication, to really get us to think about the other person, because there's always another person in our communication. And in social media, quite often we can forget that because the people that we're talking to are kind of hidden. And this picture kind of reminds us that it's one person kind of saying things. There's a guy with the foghorn there on the loudspeaker. He's talking out to people, but we can't forget that there are people out there, and actually we want a relationship with them and we want engagement from them. So it's this exchanging that I think is really important, and also the understanding of emotion and intention. So there's definitely a human element in this. So just going back to the context being really important, I've just chosen 3 contexts here, and maybe you've got some examples from your work to think about as well. So I've chosen to show three. So presentations. So let's think. So with this guy, he's talking to the board. So if there's an audience behind him, are they going to be interested? Is he engaging them well enough just by drawing on the board? So we were talking about Toastmasters earlier. Toastmasters training is you never look at the board if you're presenting. If you do, you say quiet and draw, and then come back and speak to the audience. So every time you're communicating with the audience in terms of saying things, then try engage them with your eyes and with your, you use your arms to express. You're using your whole body. So the question, how effective is that? And then in the peer group, that's a different situation. And we talked the last couple of sessions that in a peer group, you really need to be feeling that you're part of this peer group. So you've got some just common agreement, some shared decision making, maybe a common purpose or interests. And you do want to make sure that everyone's heard. So there's a certain level of behavior that we're expecting in order to get the engagement between everybody. And then if you look at the leader, again, the context becomes really important again, because the communication matters really for some purpose then, so if the leader's organizing the team, then, the effect of all the communication is probably going to be judged well after the communication has actually happened. And so, we need to keep that in mind as well. So in the moment, we might forget it, but actually judgment of communication can come much later than in the moment of doing it. So let's have a little bit of a discussion and open it up to everybody. When do you measure effectiveness for communication? When are you aware of it? So I'm happy for you to write in the chat again, or unmute your audio and speak. Well done, William. When you want more engagement. Okay. So can you give us a specific example, William? That would be helpful, I think. What's the context, the scenario? For you, I guess it's training.
So what I look out for is confirming whether the other person has gained clarity from what I am sharing and they can follow it through. Those are one of the key things I want to confirm through engagement.
Okay. So you're making that judgment based on what's happening in the moment.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it in the moment.
Yeah. So that's great, and that aligns with Roz saying when it triggers a response. So we feel engagement ourselves, don't we? So we're looking for people to be interested in what we have to say. So we know when someone's listening and giving us our attention, and that probably is the basic measure of good communication. So if we speak and someone's listening, then we know there and then, we can tell if they're giving us attention, and that is validation of us speaking. So really important to us. So Eric says the same. When the person responds with a question or answer, that's evidence that people are actually interested in what you have to say. So let's just think. What about training, William, in terms of what the other person thinks about the effectiveness of the communication?
So during training, the person wants to be able to understand what you're sharing, and also for them, as you're sharing it, they want to they will be processing it and see how it works in their context. Yeah. So as a trainer, you have to be presenting stories, and you have to be touching on the content in a way that would engage the person listening so that they can gain something out of that conversation happening.
Okay, great. But yeah, so you would ask them at some point how effective it was for them.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm holding a question there. When do we actually ask somebody how effective our communication was? So we quite often judge whether they're listening, but we rarely ask for feedback on how good our communication was. And of course, as we mentioned Toastmasters before, that is one of the basic elements of Toastmasters training, that you learn how to give good feedback to people, and we can learn to expect feedback. Okay, let's just move the discussion on a little bit. I think I'll just pass over that. So the next question is, well, how do you measure effectiveness for communication? So this is the meat of the matter, right? So we've been talking about attention. We've talked about receiving feedback, so that's great. We've talked about in the chat observation, engagement. So this is all great, but if we have to put numbers on things, like I asked you at the beginning, how do we put a number? How do we judge ourselves at 5 or a 6? How do we know? Because very rarely do we get measured in this way. So I wondered what thoughts you had about how you judged effectiveness. Okay, so now we're getting some really good feedback on asking the audience or asking participants, all right? And now it's asking people for feedback. So now we're moving into the context and the value, which is really interesting. So we kind of forget the communication, in a sense. We forget, we forget how clear it was, how someone was engaged, how much we listened to their questions and actually answered the questions very simply and straightforwardly. That all gets forgotten in terms of value now. We kind of lump it all together. So it's quite hard to get help to improve our communication. So maybe we need to get a little bit more specific about what we're asking people to feed back to us on. So Lola's sounding to me like a trainer, William. So she says their response to my questions about the content. So yeah, the audience really does need the trainer to answer questions very carefully. So yes, I agree with that. All right, so I'm going to, would anyone like to make any comments so far about anything that they might have learned or feel challenged on so far? By all means, unmute. Isaac, let me pick on you.
Sorry, what was the question again?
What's been valuable so far? Is this kind of no knowledge, or do you agree that it's quite hard to measure effectiveness of communication?
I think to me it's been valuable. It's very hard to sometimes measure the effectiveness, but I think I put something in the chat box where one thing I'm beginning to learn now, I'm having to work with a lot of senior stakeholders now, and they tend to always play back what I've said just to try and make sure they've understood that. And that's one of the ways, so something I've started learning to do as well. After someone has spoken or said something or communicated, I try and play it back to them as well. That's another way of measuring effectiveness. Because obviously if they haven't said the right thing, then what I can do is, repeat it again in a much better way.
Yeah, I agree. So that gets us away from the value in terms of the purpose. It gets us closer to the relationship we've got with somebody, the rapport we've got with someone, and the kind of connection and understanding which we've got between each other. Gets us very close, much closer to that human element, really understanding where people are coming from and understanding emotion connected with it as well. So yeah, great point. But it's not something we naturally think about. But I'm really trying to dig deeper at what we mean by effectiveness of communication. So let me go back. Sorry. So I did an online search for what effectiveness means, because, you know, we all go to Google when we want to know something, don't we? And I found this lovely 7 C's of communication, you know, so you can measure how clear it was, how concise, concrete, correct, coherent, complete, courteous, also credible and creative. So there are lots of things we can measure. And, you know, we need to start asking people what they think of these things. But so that helps us with our communication in getting feedback, but it doesn't necessarily help us with that relationship element that Isaac spoke about. So, you know, we all personally have to work at our own communication. We can ask people for feedback to improve it, but we need to ask them specifically what's their opinion, or we need to ask the thing that we're looking for, the bit of feedback that we're looking for. So it might be one of these 7 C's, but it also might be, how well are we getting on? You know, and having more of a conversation about the relationship that we're having and how we're collaborating and working together. What's working well, what's not working well, what do we agree on, what do we not disagree on? So that effective communication is when we can actually talk to each other straight in an authentic way. So we're actually telling the truth all the time to each other. That's a good sign of a really good rapport and connection. So that takes me back to my 3-skill model, and definitely trying to emphasize that communication is about a focus on another person, and it is really about collaborating with that person through the communication. And then, and only then, can we really get a shared view of effectiveness. So my challenge today is that we need to be more aware of effectiveness, not only of the specifics of our communication that are traditional, like the clarity of it, but also about working with other people so that we're effective together through our communication, and then we're actually connecting in our communication. And we can get a shared view of how well we're working together. So I think we do need to ask people for feedback on effectiveness and how well we're working together. Which brings me to my challenge, i.e. stakeholders in any communication need to take responsibility to share their view on how well it's all working. So that's my challenge. So my question to you guys is, do you accept the challenge? So perhaps I can see in the chat if you can write yes or no. I agree, Angela, this humour helps. I probably haven't used much humour today. Any tips on how to use more? That would be great. Right, has anyone changed their mind today slightly? Would anyone like to talk about that?
So, Shirley.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've been looking at effective communication. Is it more from a face-to-face approach or an over Zoom or online approach? What about effective communications through writing? Is this something that should also be considered?
I think so. This brings us back to social media, doesn't it? So, you know, we're trying to get people to engage. So you have, if you go to any social media expert who's saying you need to write it in a way that people will engage, will respond, will write comments. So yes, I think this is my point. We always have to assume there is an audience and that we're trying to create a relationship with that audience or with this other person. There's always another person that you can identify an avatar for. So you've got an idea of what sort of person they are that you're trying to appeal to. You know, you might know their age, their gender, what they do in life. There's a certain type of person that you're trying to engage with. So yes, I think all communication is about, it's not just for ourselves, it's about somebody else as well, or another group. So we always have to think about it and get their feedback again. Otherwise, how do you know what sort of connection you've got? Yeah, be interesting to know what to do about all that hate stuff that people do. I don't engage in that. I just try to avoid it. I try and keep on LinkedIn with a lot of work focused stuff. But yeah, I don't know what you do about negative engagement. That's a subject for a topic for another time, maybe. So
yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, this is Karthik here. I have a question.
Hi, Karthik.
So hi. So when this brings back to me the question that I have when we write emails to our colleagues or to stakeholders or to your clients, and when you don't get the response to the emails that's been sent, how do you measure the effectiveness of this communication?
Yeah, this is a million-dollar question, isn't it? So you know, there are different places to look. Certainly, you know, you're going to get some people that say, oh, your English is not great, right? You haven't, or the structure of your email could be much better. So, you know, maybe you've got a 5 out of 10 for writing skill. So someone can come along and make it a 10. Personally, I think the topic and what's in it for the other person probably comes way above the content of the email or the writing that you're doing. So, you know, what makes people engage? Well, they come to a training session because they're interested in finding out stuff. So what's in the writing that is going to appeal to the person that you're writing to? Somehow you have to build a relationship so that they're interested in responding or reading what you have to say. I mean, this is a big problem with social media and people writing emails and newsletters. The take-up and opening rate for newsletters is very low. So people spend a lot of time writing a newsletter, but doesn't mean people are going to read it. It's like, you know, presenters in an audience. Not everyone in the audience is going to listen or agree with what they've said. So they might just switch off halfway through. You know, I could be asking you what your feedback is on this webinar. You know, I have no idea what action you're going to take as a result. All I can do is try and engage you in the best way I can. And I'm obviously going to give myself a score out of that. And there are things I can improve. But you know, at the end of the day, it's the engagement that actually matters. So if something's not working, if some writing's not working or my webinar wasn't working, then I'd have to go away and think about what I was going to change to improve things. Does that help? I agree. Some people are rude.
It does,
some people are rude, you know, just think they're too busy or too arrogant or whatever. But I would recommend coming from the position that they're very busy. You have to capture their attention somehow. So, you know, a really clear subject line, which is of interest to them, is probably going to be the number one key thing.
Yeah. Yeah, the challenge is because when you send email to multiple recipients, then it is always difficult to cater the needs of all of them. Because if you ask me personally, I don't like reading long emails. I would like emails to be very short and precise, and it has to deliver the message in first few lines itself.
Yeah.
I would prefer that.
Yeah,
right.
I would
And
definitely,
everybody will have their own preferences.
Yeah, and I would say that, you know, from an agile coaching culture perspective, I think, you know, having a conversation about what effective communication means between the group, between the team, if you like, is essential. So, you know, have a conversation about what effective communication means between you all, so that you've got some kind of shared view. You know, it's definitely a good discussion point, and people will disagree, but maybe you can get some core agreement. You know, maybe long emails really should be articles in a data repository somewhere like Slack, you know, and emails are just prompts. I don't know. I think it's very hard to be on receiving lots of emails. For me, you know, long CC lists and things are quite annoying. But so I, you know, I would like to be in a culture where we've actually talked about what makes sense for us.
Yeah.
But I know it's hard, it's a challenge, but it's worth, you know, it comes back to what's the value of effective communication, which I sort of asked subtly at the beginning. You know, you have to put a value on effective communication. And because we do it all the time, and everything that we do is based on communication, I think it has really high value. So if we could spend a bit more time on worrying about effectiveness and what was effective for everybody, it might be interesting. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Has anyone got any real life examples of things that they might change going forwards, or things they have changed recently and it made a difference?
Okay. Shirley.
You can ask me
Hello.
a question. Hi.
Yeah. Just to add on to Katik's message, probably for one to consider an email as effective, would you also consider the response time it takes the person to send it? Because we've got busy lives, we've got so many things happening. Someone not responding on time might not mean they've not found the email useful, or probably they are thinking about how to make sure that they give a good response. Is response time also considered as effective communication?
Well, I think effectiveness relates to what people expect. So, you know, I would ask if there are shared expectations between those two people or the group that are effective. You know, is there a kind of team expectation of 24-hour turnaround on emails, or a week, or whatever it is? You know, if everyone shares that commitment, I would say, yeah, that does come into effectiveness. But if there's no shared agreement, then, you know, people can do what they want. So it's quite hard. So unless there's some social imperative, then people are free to make a decision on what's their own priority. So I think it gets difficult. This is why, you know, culture is important, and you know, all societies have rules so that we set expectations for everybody. So does that help? I think I'm dodging it in a way, but I think I'm saying yes, but you have to set expectations in order to say yes. You can't sit there in an apathetic way and expect people to conform to your expectations if you haven't actually laid the ground rules down.
Yeah, because some people's expectations of responded emails is about 1 hour or 2 hours.
Yeah.
Whilst,
I think it's unreasonable to expect everyone to return them in 1 hour, unless you think they're sitting around doing nothing. Just, you know, everyone, in my experience, everyone who's working is busy. Is juggling lots of stuff.
So there's a need for expectation management in.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, this is how teams collaborate, right?
Yeah.
Rules of collaboration, I think, yeah, definitely are things that we need to talk about.
Okay.
So a couple of things that you have said here that really that are very interesting. First of all, great presentation. What you have done is make, at least personally, make me think about a whole lot of things. But based on personal experience and what I have done in the past, I've been in the corporate environment a long time, and at the top management level. And one thing I realized is that, and you said a couple of keywords here. You said rules, which typically will lead to expectations. So when you set rules, everybody knows what the expectations are based on those rules.
Yeah.
But the other key thing is that once we set those expectations, what the objective is, because you have to know in every situation you're going into. If you're going to be communicating with a group of people, the first thing you have to have at the back of your mind is, what is your objective? What are you trying to achieve? So if you know what the objective is, then the next thing is you figure out who your audience is. Do you have the right audience to help tackle that objective? If you don't have the right audience, then what do you need to do? Do you have to go through the process of educating them first to understand what the ultimate objective and goal is? Once that is done, then you can effectively communicate to them what the big picture is, and hopefully you're able to elicit from them the kind of response you need. So it's like a train the trainer situation. So if you want to, you're rolling out anything, we're rolling out policies or anything, you gather people you sort of designate as your subject matter expert. You teach them, you train them, they know what the objective is. And if they can relay that back to you, you know your job is done, then they can help communicate that. So objective, extremely important, and teaching and training your audience. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to hear your voice, Joseph, and yeah, I understand. I was in corporate life for 31 years, so I know what you're saying, and that kind of leadership training, control, rules downwards. I think the agile coaching culture is asking us to do it a little bit differently, to actually get a team to be autonomous. It needs to make its own rules up at some point. So getting engagement through agreement and agreeing how we want to work together, I think, is becoming more important. So engaging people in conversations about how we collaborate is important, I think. So trying it out to get people's contributions about what's reasonable, a reasonable expectation, especially in the COVID situation. Now, we've all been really challenged in new ways. So, and everyone's got different challenges to cope with. So, I think that's brought it to the fore a little bit more, that we need to talk to people about some of these issues. We tend to take them all for granted, whereas actually, when we work together, it's like, having a family. You have to kind of get people on board to decide where they're going to go on holiday, rather than just tell them. So it's always nice to share, but it's also quite hard to do. It's not easy to get agreement, but I think the trying is what's helping us to have more social cohesion today, more social justice, if you like. It's all about the communication that we're doing and understanding where people are coming from. So I wish you luck, because these are challenges. But if you've got any further questions, I'm very happy to talk to anyone offline about any of this stuff. I think I've got my email here, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Very happy to have a conversation. But yeah, some fab input, and I'm glad you accepted the challenge. What I'm not 100% clear about is whether you've actually changed your view today at all, but I'm just getting a little inkling that it has raised awareness, and maybe you'll go and think some more about how much more you could do to help everyone be effective.
Thank you, Shirley. This is Angela.
Thank you, Shirley.
Can
I think it's Angela's just speaking,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I'm really sorry I arrived a bit late today. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. Which is ironic because it's about communication effectively over using technology. So sometimes it's not always as effective for those reasons. But I think one of the key things that I picked up was the cultural aspect of the conversation, because I think it's important when working in organizations that you observe how other people communicate, whether that is informal or formal. And from experience, I've seen that plays a huge role. So if you start a company, start working at a company, and the culture is very informal, and you take a formal approach when communicating, I've seen that can be very seen as very, very detrimental, and you'd have a lot of misunderstandings and miscommunications. So I don't know if we spoke about the various different types of communication at the beginning, but I think that's quite a crucial part.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you. Shirley, do you want to wrap up?
I think I sort of did. Very, very happy with the engagement today. If anyone would like to give me feedback on how clear it was and what they've got, I'd be very happy to have that as well. Always looking for ways to improve. We've had 3 sessions now. I've kind of settled on this way of introducing an idea, discussing it, and having a challenge. So I'm going to continue that for the rest of the sessions on different topics. But if someone would like something different, or then I'm open to requests, let's say.
Okay. Thank you, Shirley, and thank you everyone for joining us. Next week we've got Eric on testing, agile testing. Tuesday we've got a focus on the skilled agile. Thursday again we've got Shirley, and I'll be sharing Shirley's leaflet so you could all join, and make sure that you have the right links to join. Let's have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend ahead. Thank you all for joining, and thank you, Shirley. Let's have a good day.
Yeah, you too, William. Thank you.
Thanks, Shirley. Thank you,
Shirley.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shirley.